Every morning, across Spain, mothers woke up in hospital beds and asked the same question. Where's my baby? Every morning, they were given the same answer. Your baby didn't make it. We're sorry. Go home. Grieve. Move on. And every morning, somewhere else in that same building, down a corridor, behind a closed door, in a room these women were never allowed to enter, their babies were being handed to other families. Alive, breathing, already being given a different name. This was not one hospital. This was not one city. This was not one decade. This ran across every major city in Spain. It ran inside Catholic clinics, state maternity wards, convent nurseries, and private practices. It ran from 1939 to the 1990s, and an estimated 300,000 babies were taken before it was over. To understand how something this large stayed hidden for this long, you have to understand what Spain looked like when it started. 1939. Franco had just won the Spanish Civil War. The Spanish Republic was gone. 200,000 people had been executed in the years surrounding that war. Hundreds of thousands more were in prison camps. And Franco's regime had already begun asking a question that should have terrified the world. What do we do with the children of our enemies? A military psychiatrist named Antonio Vallejo Nadra had the answer. He had spent years developing a theory, not based on race, but on politics. He believed Marxism was a biological disease. He believed that the children of Republican mothers carried that disease in their blood. And he believed that if you separated those children from their mothers early enough, raised them inside approved Catholic, nationalist families, you could cleanse that bloodline in a single generation. This was not a fringe idea. This was state policy. A law passed in 1940 gave the government authority over the children of imprisoned women. Children could not stay with their mothers in prison past the age of 3. They were placed in convents, in orphanages, in state facilities where their names were changed and their origins erased. Many of them never went home. But here is where the story becomes something darker than politics. By the 1950s, the system had evolved. It was no longer just about ideology. It had become a business. The targets expanded. Unmarried mothers, poor families, women giving birth alone, with no husband, no legal protection, no one in the room they could trust. The Catholic Church had been given control of Spain's hospitals, schools, and social services under Franco. Nuns ran maternity wards. Priests compiled waiting lists of wealthy couples who wanted children. Doctors falsified birth certificates. And Spanish law, quietly, efficiently, made all of it possible. A birth certificate in Spain did not legally require the biological mother's name. A doctor could register a newborn under a completely different woman's identity and walk away without breaking a single written law. The system didn't need to hide in the shadows. The system was the law. Inside delivery rooms, the process was almost mechanical. A mother would give birth. The baby would be taken for cleaning, they were told, for tests, for observation. The baby did not come back. Instead, a nurse, or a nun, carrying a small bundle that was wrapped and cold and still. Your baby was born with complications, they would say. We did everything we could. There was rarely a body shown. There was rarely a death certificate produced on the spot. There was just a woman, sedated or exhausted or alone, being handed grief and told to carry it quietly. While down the hall, a couple who had paid was already holding her child. At one clinic in Madrid, the San Ramon Clinic, records from 1981 showed that 70% of all births registered that year listed the mother as unknown. 70%. In one clinic. In 1 year. The men and women who ran this network were not operating in secret. They were respected. They were decorated. They attended Mass every Sunday. They baptized the children they had stolen. They told themselves it was God's work, taking babies from unworthy mothers and placing them in devout homes where they would be properly raised. One doctor, when confronted decades later, reached across his desk, picked up a metal crucifix, held it toward his accuser, and said, "I have always acted in his name." He was never convicted. In 2018, 79 years after the system began, a woman named Inés Madrigal walked into a Madrid courtroom. She had spent years building her case from fragments, mismatched documents, records that didn't align. A birth registered to a woman who had no memory of giving birth. The man she was there to face was an 85-year-old former gynecologist named Eduardo Vela. The court heard the evidence. The court reviewed the records. The court found Eduardo Vela guilty. guilty of taking a child from her biological mother, guilty of falsifying documents, guilty of handing a human being to strangers without consent. Then the court acquitted him. The statute of limitations, the judges ruled, had expired. He walked out of that courthouse a free man. Outside on the steps, Ines Madrigal stood in front of cameras and said, "It's the first sentence that recognizes there was a theft, that they took me from my real mother." Then she said, "But we are not in agreement with the acquittal. To this day, not one doctor, not one nurse, not one nun has been successfully prosecuted. Not one. And Spain is not the only country where this happened. In Argentina, during the military dictatorship of 1976 to 1983, an estimated 500 children were taken from mothers who were disappeared by the regime, born in secret detention centers, handed to military families, their identities erased. Some of those children are still finding out the truth today. In Ireland, unmarried mothers were sent to church-run homes where their babies were taken and sold, often to American families, while the mothers were told their children had died or been placed beyond reach. In South Korea, hundreds of thousands of children were sent overseas for adoption through agencies that falsified paperwork, pressured mothers, and built an industry on separated families. In East Germany, the communist government forcibly removed children from families considered politically suspect, erasing bloodlines the state found inconvenient. These are not isolated tragedies. These are patterns. The same playbook, run by different governments, on different continents, across different decades. And most of the people responsible, were never held accountable. We will be covering every single one of these stories. The ones you've heard fragments of, the ones that never made the history books, the ones that powerful institutions have spent decades hoping you would never find. Subscribe and stay close, because what's coming will shock you in ways you are not prepared for. If you watched this far, you already know this story deserves to be seen. Share this video right now. For every mother who was handed an empty bundle and told to move on. For every adult who is still holding a DNA result in a stranger's name. Drop the word "remember" in the comments below. Not for the algorithm, for the 300,000. Because the moment we stop talking about this is the moment the system wins again.